Hey, what is up guys? Welcome back to the channel and welcome back to Gran Turismo 7 update 1.38. In my final car review for the latest update, I'm going to be reviewing the Mazda 3 Group 4. This car was leaked prior to the update and actual announcement of the silhouettes, and I think most people kind of turned their back on this car far too early. Overall, I find that this car is just, well, rather quite impressive to be honest, and definitely exceeds all of my expectations that I had for it. So let's review Gran Turismo 7's latest race car. Now let's head over to Brand Central first of all to have a look at the price and the stats of this car. Now it comes in at 350,000 credits. This is the standard price for a Group 4 car. No more, no less. In terms of its displacement, it's actually undisclosed. It has an overall PP of 635.09. Max power is 380 brake horsepower, weighing 1200 kilograms with turbocharged aspiration. So let's go ahead and get straight into the review. Now, if you've never joined me for a car review, when it comes to race cars, they get a single hot lap around the Nordschleife. After that, we'll have a look how the car did in its bog standard form. So it'll be straight out of Brand Central, no tuning, no fine tuning, nothing like that, no extra parts. And we'll rank it on our Nordschleife hot lap leaderboard to see where it stacks up against the rest of the competition. So BOP is not a factor in terms of running these cars. So the Mazda 3 Group 4 is a car that was leaked prior to update 1.38. Myself and many other people did plenty of videos covering it, so we did actually know about it before the silhouettes dropped, meaning that when they did finally drop by Kaz on the Saturday, I believe, we already kind of knew what was on the way, meaning that we only had realistically two other cars to check out, that being the RCR Garage Civic and the FL5 Civic Type R, which is the latest generation. So the Mazda 3 Group 4, we've all been wishing for race cars for the longest time, and well, we finally do have a new one. Probably not one that many people asked for, but I'd actually say this car has become more and more interesting the more I've actually used it. Now, we already have a Mazda 3 in game, and obviously this is going to take its base from that vehicle. The one we have in game is actually a four-wheel drive variant of the Mazda 3. This one for the race car though is swapped out to be an FF layout vehicle. Now usually that's a terrible sign and many people will just turn their back on the car straight away, and I think many people probably did quite prematurely, just kind of, I guess, ignore this car, to be quite fair. And I kind of get it, FF cars really aren't that popular in game, but you know, this entire update was based around FF cars, so if you do want to use the latest vehicles, you're going to have to run an FF layout car. I don't necessarily see that as a bad thing though. Obviously the usual and typical downsides to the vehicle are there, mainly the tyre wear and a bunch of understeer. However, I would say that it's really not too bad in terms of the Group 4 Mazda 3. Now, personally for me, I'd say the only major downside that I've found when I've been using it is actually the tyre wear. I'd say understeer really isn't that bad with this vehicle, even when you've got it strapped full of upgrades. I find that it's rather quite a controllable vehicle, especially once you go into the more fine-tuning options with it. It's a very usable overall vehicle. Now, in terms of the car itself, it does seem to take styling designs from both the Super as well as the abandoned Mazda 3 TCR project, mainly being the insanely big rear wing on this thing. Now that is actually customizable, which I think is quite a nice little thing. You can run this wingless, or you can run two different types of sort of really big wings. Personally, I think it actually suits the styling of the Mazda 3, and I think overall there's just a lot more detail to this Group 4 car than I originally imagined. Now, if you go ahead and actually upgrade the standard Mazda 3, there is some kind of options that to sort of make it more towards what the Group 4 does look like. However, it's more in the finer details of the Group 4 where I think this thing absolutely stands out and becomes a much better looking car than I originally imagined. So from a looks perspective, I definitely think at first I was like, okay, it's probably just going to be sort of a copy paste of the Mazda 3, obviously the road going version, but I think over time, the more I've looked into the detail, the wide body kit on it, the rear wings, the rear diffusers and such, I just think it looks absolutely fantastic, and it's certainly a design that's definitely grown on me. Now let's move on next to performance, and we're going to mainly talk about the FF layout. Obviously, like I said, the road going version is a four-wheel drive model in game. Now this is changed to an FF model for the race car. Usually this means a ton of tyre wear, and that's still definitely the case and the only real drawback of actually using this car. However, in terms of, you know, overall other performance, including acceleration, top speed, handling, I've actually found that this is a much better and tighter package than I originally imagined. I was expecting this thing to just be a bit of a throwaway car, but I've heard rumours that under BOP, and I can't really get in the lobbies and actually use this thing currently. For some reason, when I tried on Monday, I just couldn't get in, and it's, well, still the case now, a day later. I've heard in terms of the BOP, this thing's actually rather quite good. Haven't been able to kind of get there and check the leaderboards just yet, but there is rumours that this thing absolutely breaks the Group 4 BOP, which is probably not the case. It's probably just quite a decent overall car, and that's one thing that kind of carries over in terms of a non-BOP'd version, that the top speed is insanely good on this thing. In terms of its handling, it's relatively easy to drive. I found that understeer really isn't that bad on this car. Now, in some of these sort of Group 4 FF layout cars, it's much more pronounced than a lot of the others, and you can definitely tell it's an FF drive car, whereas I feel like with the Mazda 3 it feels much more planted, and that understeer isn't a massive issue compared to a lot of the other FF layout cars. So I'd definitely say in terms of that side of the performance, it's really not a hindrance like it can be with some of the other FF model layouts. So let's move on next to braking and tyres. Now, this is going to be a bit of a big thing, to be quite honest. In terms of the overall brakes, they're going to do the job just fine. I wouldn't say they're absolutely amazing, but they're definitely not terrible, and they definitely serve the purpose for this vehicle. In terms of your brake bias, if you want to try and keep those tyres alive as long as possible, fully recommend putting it to the rear to around about 3 or 5. I've noticed that this is definitely giving me a lot more tyre life over longer runs, and that's going to be the major downside, like I've mentioned. The tyre life on these cars are really not that great, and it definitely shows, especially in terms of some of these single player events where it's sort of boosted up quite a bit in terms of your sort of tire wear and fuel weight ratio, usage ratio, where it just seems to absolutely shred its tires no problem. Now, this could lead you to either A, running racing hards, which yes, you'll get more life out of, but you're definitely sacrificing a lot of the performance. Now, in terms of this review, obviously I'm using the racing hards. These are the standard tires, but definitely in terms of some of the more competitive races around about 700 pp and such, I definitely wouldn't recommend racing hards. Whilst yes, they're overall a great tire for the life, and they definitely suit the car in terms of, you know, allowing it to do longer stints, I just wouldn't recommend them because I think it definitely sacrifices too much performance. In terms of the fuel capacity as well, this is definitely a plus side to this vehicle. There was a lot of talk around the description of this vehicle being, I think, biofuel as well, or something like that. And in terms of its overall fuel consumption, it's certainly rather quite good at that. It really doesn't drink through fuel that much. I find that in terms of the Group 4 cars, this one's definitely very, very good on its fuel life. So overall, I'd say from a performance standpoint, this is definitely a much better car than I think anyone originally imagined it to be. And it's certainly one that I'll probably use in the future, whether that be in league races, custom races, or maybe even just daily races once the servers are back up. So the Mazda 3 Group 4 definitely does sneak into that top 20. It comes overall 17th, beating the likes of the GTR Nismo, the Maserati MC20 and the GAC Maverick. Now, if we look, the other Group 4 car that sits in here is actually the Alpha 155, and it's quite a bit off the pace of that. However, that car is four-wheel drive and comes in with around about over 20 performance points extra. So whilst it is at a disadvantage, it's certainly no slouch around something like the Nordschleife. So this is my final car review of update 1.38. Now, that is all of the cars covered. I've already covered the likes of the Corolla and the Ambulance, so I'm not going to go back and re-review them, but they are currently in Brand Central. In terms of the cars through 1.38, I think I've definitely been surprised by, well, absolutely all of them. Whilst I had a hint that the RCR Garage Civic and the new FL5 Type R would be good, I think probably the most surprising of the bunch has been this Mazda 3. Whilst I didn't expect any from it, and I kind of kept my expectations low, I've been pleasantly surprised whilst using this car, and it's certainly one that I'll use into the future. Thanks so much for watching. Don't forget to leave a like, comment, subscribe, turn those notifications on so you don't miss an upload from me, and I will see you in the next one. Take care, guys.